This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups. We have another podcast guest today that I've really been looking forward to for quite some time. We've been talking for probably 6 to 8 weeks trying to get this on the calendar. And Ivan, I am so glad you're with us. My guest today is Ivan Temelkov. Ivan, share a little bit about who Ivan Temelkov is.
Well, thanks for the intro, Kevin. It's really a pleasure to be here. Really excited to be on your podcast. A little bit about Ivan. Well, I think we'll start with the Cliff Notes version because otherwise
it's a much longer story.
Yeah, I think it might need another session.
Hey, you got to start overseas though. You know, you don't short circuit that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family immigrated from Bulgaria, Eastern Europe, at the age of when I was 14. Moved to the U.S. My family was just seeking, better opportunities, a better life. My father basically had $400 in his pocket and arrives in the U.S. and it's kind of like, okay, what do I do from here? Fast forward to that, 25 years later, he's a business owner and, kind of living the American dream, right? Which is, I think, what everybody wants, or living the American dream version that everyone makes out of themselves. Everything that I did when we first moved here is for the most part, what I've done with my career, everything has been self-taught. I've always been this kid who, even at the earlier days in the playground, I was, doing shady business with kids and trying to make deals and always getting into stuff that I probably shouldn't have been getting into. And I think that was probably one of the earliest signs of knowing that I wanted something out of life. I wanted something that I wanted to have ownership over, something that I would be passionate about, but I didn't quite know what that was. So when we moved to the States, obviously cultural, language barrier, kind of learning the language, blending in. In my earlier teens, when we first moved here, for the first couple of years that we were here, I was bullied because I was different. And, kids kicked me around the bus, called me names, whatnot, and I think that was a time where there was really low self-esteem and confidence. And I think for a long period of time, a lot of people interpreted me as an introvert because of that, especially in my late teens and then in my early 20s. A lot of people interpreted me as someone who maybe failed to express himself. And, that was the impression that I had of myself, too. Like, I started to wonder, do I really fail to express myself? And, am I really different than everybody else? And
Ivan, I'm no doctor, but that's a poor diagnosis.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That is a poor diagnosis.
Yeah, I looked under Wikipedia under extrovert, and I think I saw your picture.
Yes, you are absolutely right, and
I mean that as a compliment.
Oh, absolutely, and you're right. You're absolutely right, because I think I had this preconceived notion that I was an introvert because everyone else labeled me as an introvert.
Yeah.
When in fact, I'm very social, very outgoing, very networking type, love to meet new people, forge new relationships. And so when we first moved here, I think there was kind of this encapsulated mindset because of the environment and surroundings I was in. At a very early age, I was very passionate about technology. In one of my father's first business endeavors, he owned a small pizza joint here in St. Louis, Missouri. Things that I would do after
God's country.
Right. So I would do things like, dismantling his computer and playing with software and like things just, a 14, 15-year-old kid really shouldn't be doing. Probably just should be doing my homework. But, I refrained from doing that. Technology was something that was very intricate to me. I loved it. And I think I knew at a very early age that, the internet specifically was the next best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
It was at such a premature stage. It was so immature at that point. So this was 1994, 1995, long time ago at this point, and that was probably one of the earliest signs of kind of exploring with technology, getting into it, being really a tech geek at heart. And kind of fast forward from there, started my career in 2006 in internet marketing, literally just saw a job ad out there, jumped in, had no idea that I had a knack for this. So kind of worked myself from there, self-taught myself how to code websites, self-taught myself how to do internet marketing, search engines. Remember MySpace, and I think these days
Yeah.
people might unfriend me on Facebook if I tell them that I was on MySpace. But um, that's
They all
that's
were. They just won't admit it.
exactly, exactly. I think everyone was, and I even remember back in high school, as we used to get, kicks out of with other friends popping in our AOL CD and getting on the internet and hearing that crackling noise, and so that was entertaining. So fast forward, kind of started out in 2006, self-taught myself how to do internet marketing. Kind of grew from there. Worked in the agency world. Was fortunate to work with a lot of startups, helping them build their digital service offerings. Then for the last, let's see, from 2011 to 2015, I had the opportunity to teach search engine marketing at the
Uh-huh.
university level. That was a really great opportunity because the assistant professor that was heading up that program kind of reached out to me and said, "Hey, you seem to be someone who, practices what he preaches. You're result driven. Would you be interested in doing this?" I'm like, "Well, I'll be honest with you. I've never taught anything. So, let's take a stab at this." And, something that I wanted to share too is everything I've done in my career that's led up to where I'm today, running my own startup. Everything has been self-taught. I was a kid who dropped out of college in my first 2 years because I just didn't really have interest in what I was doing. I was going after IT because I thought that IT was something that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized
Right.
that, entrepreneurship, networking, building your dreams, making your dreams a reality was really what was at the core of what I wanted to do. Because after all, when I thought about it, my father worked so hard to where he is today. And a lot of what he did was for his family also. So why not embrace that opportunity? An
Yeah.
opportunity of a lifetime is to be able to make your dreams a reality. So that's kind of I guess we'll call it the Cliff's Notes version of,
Sure.
of Ivan and who Ivan is.
Well, one thing you touched on right there, I don't want to just kind of skip by because a lot of our interviews we talk about the idea that nothing leading up to today is wasted. So, I mean, you can look back and see all of the experiences you had, even going back to childhood experiences
Yeah.
that have made you who you are today, but primarily in the digital space. I mean, how many different things have you taught yourself to do, or you just tried? And yet, when we get to razor sharp digital today, it's kind of an amalgamation of all these things that you've experienced
Yep.
and been involved in up to this point. So, tell me, what would you say? Well, give me the elevator pitch of razor sharp digital.
hmm Yeah, so
What do you do?
Razor Sharp Digital is a human-centric digital agency that we work with brands and helping them become more human-centric through omnichannel. So this is in essence everything that has to do under the digital umbrella, but work with brands and companies to become more humanized, more personalized, and be able to reach their customers.
Hmm. So, how long? When was this specific company founded?
So actually, coming up on 2 years here in May
Okay.
at this point. Interestingly enough, every time someone asks me about what I do, these days I think I refrain from mentioning the word startup because I was talking to someone who's very successful recently. They said, "Look, you're degrading yourself when you say that you're a startup because immediately when you say startup, people are like, oh, this guy's broke, has no money, and he's trying to make ends meet." That's like literally the perception of a startup, right? And
Right.
truth be told, it is a startup, and it's a startup upwards to 4 or 5 years because most businesses don't actually come to fruition or, as they say, go into the green until the fourth or fifth year mark. So it's 2 years running, coming up in May. It's been 100% my bread and butter, and I'll continue to ride the craziness for as long as I can withstand it, I guess.
Well, in that craziness, tell me what you've experienced in the last couple of years as maybe the lowest point of your
Mhm.
company.
There's been a lot of low points. That's kind of a part of entrepreneurship is you mentioned other experiences,
Hmm. But does
which
one really stick out in your mind?
you know it's probably the times when there was like downtime, like when things seemed stagnant, like uh, and that's probably one of the lowest points because it's kind of like when you have a business, you know. one of the biggest misconceptions with entrepreneurs is just that they feel like, consistent cash flow should be kind of evident to
Mm-hmm.
everything. And one of the things that I've learned, one of my lowest points has been is that moments of being stagnant when, there's no business coming in at that time. It kind of feels like you're plateauing. And literally, that's probably one of the worst times for an entrepreneur because literally your head starts going into a million different
Yeah.
directions, wondering about
Is this going to
what is it,
work? Or
right? Is this worth it?
mm-hmm.
Is this worth the sacrifice? Literally. And that is actually, that low point happens multiple times because until you actually get to that green phase 4 or 5 years down the
Mm-hmm.
road, which, by the way, 99% of entrepreneurs don't make it that
Yeah.
long because they get discouraged. Unforeseen things happen that prohibit them from kind of, following that path. So the low point has been, being stagnant and feeling frustrated, that wondering whether or not what you're doing is worthwhile.
Let me ask you a question related to that. Is it a misnomer to think that in those say lulls in the business that's your opportunity to create more, that's your opportunity to put better systems in place, or is it almost the opposite effect in when you're running your business, that even in the busiest times, that's when you're most creative, that's when you're most effective, most efficient? What has been your experience?
Well, you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head there on that one. Is when those low points, or when you have that feeling for low points, is when you really need to focus. That's your best
Mm,
time to focus. That's your best time to really figure out your processes, your
yeah.
operations, maybe start working on new projects, and think about, okay, what can I do next to continue to evolve and grow? More self education, more personal development.
Mm-hmm.
These are all essential things that can be done in the downtime. And as someone who being in the digital world and primarily in the agency world, is that I couldn't quite grasp that when I would have those low points. Like, it literally took me probably about a year or so to kind of figure out when those low points would hit, like what to focus on, like what to do then, literally.
Right.
And that's exactly it. Is that I would focus. I would start to or go back to planning also, and kind of revive my plan, my processes.
Mm-hmm.
Work on more relationship building also.
That's a
Just going
yeah.
out and meeting people.
That's a good word, and I want our listeners to really listen to that, because you are going to have periods that are down. You're going to have valleys in the kind of the business cycle, and so it would be easy to get depressed in those valleys and just kind of think, oh well, just almost have a pity party. I don't have any business. I'm just going to have to sit here and wait and
Right.
think more creative ways to get more business. But it may be an exact opportunity to put better systems in place, like you mentioned. But we never like to end on a low note. So tell me what's been your highest high since you've started Razor Sharp.
Um, Probably the highest high, has been working with clients that I would never anticipate working with in the past. It's kind of like, you try to reach so high. And so my high has been really is just landing opportunities that I thought were unrealistic
Hmm.
otherwise. And as an entrepreneur, I think, you mentioned depression. Depression is a big problem with entrepreneurs. It really is, especially around the holidays,
Yeah.
because there's just so many things that become so evident. Like, if you have family, if you have kids, most entrepreneurs worry about cash flow, paying bills, the financial aspect
Mm-hmm.
of that. And so the highs, for me, has been is landing unrealistic opportunities that otherwise I would have thought that would happen. And look, any entrepreneur, I think, is capable of landing those opportunities. You just have to be able to set your goals so high and always strive for high expectations, because I think also entrepreneurs kind of encapsulate themselves
Mm-hmm.
in thinking that, I'm incapable of doing this. So my highest has been really landing opportunities that, as we were chatting earlier, the ability to teach at a university
Mm-hmm.
level. I never thought that I would. This was actually prior to Razor Sharp Digital, and
Right.
I actually exited out of that opportunity so I could focus on my business also. But that was an opportunity, that I never thought that I would land, and that was a great opportunity,
Yeah.
to be able to teach, to provide continued education to other people who are interested, in learning more about digital. So that was absolutely a high. Another high I can think of is really kind of building my personal brand also online. That has really been, phenomenal. I used to do a lot of guest blogging, with starting my podcast, also being able to talk to some celebrities, Elena Cardone, Forbes Riley, or a couple of the guests that I had on my podcast. And, honestly, I think I was in this mindset that they were unreachable, that they had the superstardom that they were incapable of reaching. But you know what? They're just human beings like everyone else. They're not something superstitious that, people can't reach. And I think I was in that mindset for a long period of time that I can't reach these people because they're so preoccupied with what they're doing. So that was kind of another high, is being able to reach these people, talk to these people, and understand that, look, everyone has a need, every entrepreneur, every business owner out there. So that was like one of the highs, I think, is being able to exceed my expectations.
Yeah. Well, after this interview, I'm just going to, what you do with Grant Cardone's wife, I'm going to say, I had Ivan Temelkov on my podcast, so it does kind of cycle down. It's like cascades. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's actually something that I want to share also to your listeners too, is just that never try to encapsulate yourself, never try to limit yourself, because the reality of things is, with entrepreneurship, specifically, you've got to be outside the comfort zone. You have to be uncomfortable 24/7, 365. You literally have to develop that kind of a mindset, that kind of a lifestyle, because when you are comfortable is when you really need to worry, because then you're not doing anything to innovate. It's kind of like what's frequenting the news now with Toys R Us going out of business. Everybody's talking that, well, this is a brand that started in 1948. A lot of people didn't know that, they outsourced commerce to Amazon in the earlier days because they were in disbelief of e-commerce and the internet. Well, Amazon kind of dominated the retail space and now is causing largely in part the demise of Toys R Us, because e-commerce is such a huge part. So again, is using that example as be uncomfortable 24/7, 365. Innovate, do things that you otherwise wouldn't do. Get chills down your spine when you're doing it too, because if you're getting those chills, then you're doing something that you otherwise wouldn't do.
It's out of the comfort zone. Yeah. I think that Toys R Us is not the last that Amazon will probably eat. So I'd seen something that actually you posted earlier about that, maybe on Facebook or maybe LinkedIn or something. Yeah. So I'd seen that. But so tell me, just give us one or two pain points that you experience on a fairly regular basis. I mean, you kind of touched on one about the business cycle and the lulls, but be really specific. Give us two pain points that you experience with your business that our listenership may be able to speak into.
So sales and relationship building are probably two. And these are probably two of the most intricate pain points that I think any entrepreneur, any business owner will face. Because as an entrepreneur, especially in the earlier stages, you kind of have to become good at sales. Like you really have to understand the importance of relationship building and how to forge those relationships. Because one of the unfortunate parts about being a startup, starting your own business, is that you kind of wear multiple hats. And unfortunately, sales and relationship building which kind of go hand in hand, you have to almost master those. And honestly, for me, those are still two main points, because I can talk to people, I can build relationships, but it takes time. And, over time you learn, you kind of have this formula that you develop on like how you build those relationships, what to look for in terms of your business. And then on the sales side specifically is, developing your pitch deck, approaching people, being more upfront, fear, fear in sales is big. And that's something that I think from my childhood days still at times kind of tends to get the best of me, because I allow fear, to overcome me. And this happens very seldom these days. It wasn't it's not as bad as it was when I first started out. But sales and relationship building are probably two of the biggest pain points, I think. And in fact, these 2 points I think are can be detrimental to a lot of entrepreneurs, because if you can't get that going, if you can't build those relationships, or you don't have pre-existing relationships and you don't have a sales process in place, then it's going to be very, very hard for you.
Okay. I'm letting you circle around this. I'm gonna make you land the plane right now. So if you could, in one line, say, I mean, you just said sales and relationships. So give me a specific pain point related to sales. Say, I struggle in overcoming the ability to close, the fear of initial contact. What specifically in sales is do you think is your biggest pain point, and what specifically in relationship building? Because I'm trying to lay the foundation for people to be able to speak into this specifically for issues instead of kind of generic categories. So see land that plane for me.
You hit the nail on the head. Is I fear the ability to close. That's literally my biggest fears, and I think it's because I think as a digital guy for such a long period of time is just that I never actually did the closing process in sales. So that has been, I have that fear of closing, of actually asking for that sale.
Yeah.
And I think it was a lot worse almost 2 years ago when I started out, because these days it's kind of like I try to drive it through the funnel, and then finally I'll be like, all right, is this something that you'd like to work on? In fact, I just landed a new piece of business this weekend, and like, literally yesterday, I was at a lunch, and then I literally was like, is this something that you like to work on? Like, literally, just flat out.
Great question.
So, that was
when can we get started?
Yeah, when do we get started? It's like, boom, let's go. You get Ivan today, not tomorrow, not next week. And, that's maybe for a different topic or a conversation as part of the approach, but you're absolutely right. A fear of, asking for the sale.
Okay, land the relationship plane now.
Yeah, so the relationship plane is basically understanding that time and patience are intricate. That's it. When it comes to relationships, it's time and patience. Time and patience. If there's anything that I've learned, is you've got all the time in the world. And I think most entrepreneurs are misled to believe that they work within a specific time segment. Like if you're within, you've jumped into a different time zone, you've leaped ahead into time, and like that's your block, that's your designated space, and that's not true. Time and patience on relationships, you got to remember that, because some of my best clients are people that I've known for 3, 4, 5 years. Yep. And they continue to work with me, whether it's off and on or consistently, and you got to understand that that's what business is. It's almost like raising a child. Time and patience, literally.
Yep. That's a good analogy. That's a good analogy.
Yeah. So that's what people don't understand. I think because a lot of entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, seek that instant gratification, and that's not what entrepreneurship and business is. Time and patience.
Yeah. Ivan, thank you for clearly laying those out. I think it's going to give our listeners a chance to speak into those particular pain points. But I want to drill down a little deeper, get inside your head a little bit, get inside your heart on these last few questions. And so, who do you follow? Give me one person that you follow online that is really inspiring to you, and give me a kind of a brief why.
I would probably say Gary Vaynerchuk, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the reason why I follow Gary is I think, so a couple of reasons actually why I follow him. So I learned about him quite a while ago. It's been several years now that I can remember. Even going back to when he was doing the YouTube videos with Wine Library and all of that, basically being that guy spitting wine into a bucket on YouTube and everybody thinking that he was crazy. But I can resonate as a fellow, I guess, immigrant, because it was someone that, was from the outside, came and he self-taught himself everything, literally. Self-taught himself everything. And he was one of those innovators and people who were constantly pushing. Not to mention is this that he's probably one of the best salesmen I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like
he can close.
he can close. Like, I mean, and it's not just about closing, it's about building the relationship. So awareness,
Right.
interest, intent, and conversion, but he does it so seamlessly. And it's not just following Gary online. I've read several of his books. I've got, Jab, 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 Right Hook, which I read. I read his Instagram book also that he did 2 years ago. Now he's got
Crushing it.
Crushing
Yeah.
It, which is a follow up. And to be honest with you, as in all of those books, I don't necessarily look at the business or the social aspect of this. This is what's intriguing, but it's the human element of hacking human culture.
Yeah.
That's what he's so good at.
Yep.
Is and the more I realized when I was starting Razor Sharp Digital is human centricity is a big part of business, and that's why Gary really kind of intrigued with me. So I follow him. I like his books.
And he's Eastern European descent.
And in Eastern European descent, exactly. So being a little unorthodox, which he is, and that's another thing is just that in business, by the way, in entrepreneurship, you got to be unorthodox.
Yep.
Be different than everybody else. In fact, some of my former bosses who still message me on Facebook wishing me have a great day or have a great week 7, 8 years later after working for them, they finally realized that after 6, 7 years being in business, that
He's
you
going to
got
do
to
it.
be different. Yeah. Yeah. And, to be unorthodox, to
Yep.
be, and that was, I think, one of the challenges for me too. And that's what I love about Gary,
Well, he certainly stands out. He certainly stands out. So let me move on to the next point and tell me a life quote that you would say really drives you daily. What's one thing you have taped up on your wall somewhere?
You know what? It's not taped on the wall, but it will be blasted probably on the wall somewhere in my next house because we're definitely working on that. It's less talking, more doing.
I'm expecting you to have a T-shirt that says that in your next like Facebook Live video, along with your One Life hat. So, less
Yeah.
talking, more doing. That's going to be on the feedback notes in great big bold letters in a brand like a section right in the middle of the notes. So we'll put that in there. Give me one piece of advice that if you could go back, say 2 years before you started Razor Sharp Digital, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself that you think would help our listeners as well that may be in similar situations, kind of the early stage startup?
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. There's so many. One I think that probably sticks out is never worry about what other people's perception is of you. Never worry about other people's opinions.
Wow. That's great
Because
advice.
that is probably one of the quickest ways to go insane if you worry about what people think about you. And I actually did a video not too long ago, actually yesterday, about talking about the 3 different stages of modern biz growth, which is proof of concept, evolution, and growth. In the proof of concept stages, you get a lot of people who don't see value in what you do. They just don't understand you, basically. And that's probably one of the longest, most tedious stages of business, especially when you start out, because people think that you may be doing the same thing as everybody else. They don't see value in a product or your service. They think you're crazy, that you're doing stuff with like no instant gratification, no return on investment, because entrepreneurs look at that ROI. So
Right.
that's probably the best advice that I would give is never worry about other people's opinions. Focus on what you're good at. Focus on your passion. What are you passionate about? What are you going to do? Or what can you do every day for the rest of your life without looking at it from a monetary standpoint?
And just put the noise behind you.
Exactly.
Just put the noise behind you. So, can you send me a link to that video, and I can put that in the show notes as well. The video you
Sure.
just referenced there. I want to make sure that that's on and on the website on your episode page as well. So, as we wrap up today, what is there anything specifically that I haven't asked you about that you just want to touch on really quickly as we close out here, and then I'm going to ask you how people can find you online.
Sure. Wow. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. I'm always intrigued about talking entrepreneurship, business. You know, before I forget my train of thought is, yeah. So before I forget my train of thought is, any entrepreneur listening to this is I would encourage them to ensure that they have the right reason behind entrepreneurship. That you get into entrepreneurship for the right reasons. But if you're chasing the money from day one, that's a counterintuitive approach to entrepreneurship. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do. They chase money. So the best advice in closing, I would say is make sure that you have a valid reason that you're comfortable with, that can drive you as an inspiration, motivation every day behind entrepreneurship.
Outside the money.
Outside the money, exactly. Because the money will come if you keep doing what you love, you have processes that you set in place. Now, for me, just to reveal with your listeners, is that the number one reason is family. I wanted to spend more time with my family. I knew that I wouldn't have the flexibility doing a 9 to 5. Not to mention is that my dreams would never come true if I was working for someone else.
Yep.
So family was always first. And in fact, this is something that, I love about Gary, because everything he's done is ultimately leads up long-term to one day when he does sell his companies, and I think he will, is to basically rest on that fortune that he's built to be able to spend more time with his family.
And buy the New York Jets.
And buy the New York Jets, right?
He has two driving forces in life: family and buying the New York Jets. Well, Ivan, it has been a pleasure to have you on today, man. There's a lot of value in the things you've shared, and this is just the beginning. So I want to, we've talked offline, we've Facebook message, we've talked on the phone, we've emailed back and forth, and I always want to be a resource for you as well, and I just really appreciate you taking the time this morning, and once again coming to us from God's country of the state of Missouri, and just letting us peek inside your business and your head a little bit, but listeners, it's your chance now to speak into the pain points that Ivan mentioned, and this is really the kind of the USP of Rising Tide Startups is, there's a lot of interview podcasts out there, but we want to proactively engage the listening audience and say, you need to speak into this. You need to offer your feedback. And don't think that you don't have anything to offer. Life experience is what really is going to drive this. And like we like to end every podcast episode with your feedback, all boats rise in a rising tide. Ivan, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin.